Spy accusation. Was Julio Iglesias a CIA agent? The KGB file on Julio Iglesias was 247 pages long. For a romantic singer who claimed to care only about love songs and sold-out concerts, that's a lot of surveillance. For a Western entertainer performing behind the Iron Curtain during the height of the Cold War, it's either incredibly suspicious or perfectly routine. The question is, which? Moscow, June 1981. Julio Iglesias stepped off a plane at Sheremetyevo Airport into a world where every Western visitor was assumed to be a spy until proven otherwise. The Soviet Union didn't invite capitalist entertainers casually. Elvis had never performed here. Sinatra had never sung in Red Square. The Beatles had been banned. But somehow, Julio Iglesias, the smooth-voiced Spanish crooner singing about love and heartbreak, had been granted permission to perform in the USSR. 3 concerts: Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev. The first major Western pop star to tour Soviet territory in over a decade. The KGB wanted to know why, and more importantly, for whom was he really working? The story of Julio Iglesias as potential Cold War spy begins not with evidence, but with improbability. By 1981, Julio had become one of the world's biggest music stars. 300 million records sold, concerts in 60 countries, fluent in multiple languages. Comfortable with heads of state and street musicians alike. He was too smooth, too charming, too successful at gaining access to places Western intelligence agencies couldn't penetrate. In the paranoid calculus of Cold War espionage, that made him either the luckiest entertainer alive or the perfect cover for something else. But let's rewind to understand how a Spanish singer became a Cold War mystery. 1970s, Julio's impossible rise. While most Western artists struggled to break beyond their home markets, Julio seemed to open doors everywhere. Japan, where foreign music rarely charted. 1. Middle East, where Western pop was restricted, sold-out tours. Latin America, despite being Spanish, not Latino, treated like a native son. And then Eastern Europe. Yugoslavia, 1978. Under Tito's communist regime, Yugoslavia was slightly more open than other Eastern Bloc nations, but still firmly behind the Iron Curtain. Western entertainers needed approval from state authorities, cultural committees, Communist Party officials. The bureaucracy was designed to say no. Julio's team submitted a request. 3 weeks later, approved. Not just one concert, a 10-city tour. The Yugoslav government rolled out red carpets. State television broadcast his performances. Communist Party officials attended his shows. Western intelligence agencies noticed. So did the KGB. The pattern repeated. Poland, 1979. East Germany, 1980. Romania, 1980. Hungary, 1981. Each time, doors that remained closed to other Western artists opened for Julio Iglesias. The KGB's Moscow office began compiling a file. Not because they had evidence he was a spy, but because they couldn't explain why he wasn't being treated like one. Standard KGB protocol for Western entertainers visiting communist countries. Constant surveillance. Hotel rooms bugged. Conversations recorded. Associates identified. Travel movements tracked. Contact with locals monitored. Julio received all of this attention, but the reports started noting something unusual. He wasn't acting like someone trying to avoid surveillance. He was acting like someone who didn't care, openly to everyone. He accepted dinner invitations from government officials and random fans with equal enthusiasm. He wandered cities without security. He learned local phrases in every language. He charmed KGB handlers the same way he charmed audiences. This created a problem for Soviet intelligence analysts. Was this the behavior of an innocent entertainer? Or was it the behavior of someone so confident in their cover that they didn't need to be careful? June 1981, the Moscow concerts. 3 nights at the Russia Concert Hall. 6,000 people per show, mostly Communist Party officials, their families. Approved intelligentsia. Regular Soviet citizens couldn't get tickets. This was entertainment for the elite. Julio performed in Spanish. Most of the audience didn't understand the words, but they understood the music, the emotion, the romance. For 3 nights, the capital of global communism swayed to the voice of Western capitalism singing about love. Backstage, KGB officers in plain clothes mixed with musicians and handlers. They watched Julio joke with stagehands in broken Russian. They watched him embrace Soviet officials. They watched him seem absolutely, genuinely delighted to be there. Colonel Yuri Andropov, then head of the KGB, soon to be General Secretary, attended the second concert. He watched Julio perform, then requested a backstage meeting. What they discussed has never been publicly disclosed. Both men took it to their graves. But Western intelligence agencies intercepted Soviet communications afterward that suggested Andropov came away from the meeting with more questions than answers. The American side of the story is murkier. The CIA, by policy, neither confirms nor denies relationships with specific individuals. But declassified documents from the 1980s show that the agency was intensely interested in anyone who had regular access to Eastern European political elites. Entertainment cover was particularly valuable. An entertainer could travel frequently without suspicion, meet with officials in social settings, gather intelligence through casual conversation, pass messages through intermediaries in his touring party, establish relationships that could be exploited later. And Julio checked every box. He traveled constantly. He dined with presidents and prime ministers. He spoke multiple languages. His touring operation involved dozens of people moving across borders with equipment, money, and documents that rarely received deep scrutiny. The Spanish intelligence service, CNI, Centro Nacional de Inteligencia, also took notice. Spain in the 1980s was navigating a delicate position, recently emerged from Franco's dictatorship, seeking EU membership, maintaining relationships with both NATO and non-aligned nations. Julio Iglesias was Spain's most famous cultural export. If he was working for anyone's intelligence service, CNI wanted to know whose. They opened their own file. Interview with classified source, Declassified 2019, name redacted. We investigated Iglesias thoroughly between 1981 to 1984. Nothing definitive. His touring schedules made sense commercially. His meetings with foreign officials could be explained by his celebrity status. His financial records showed no unexplained income. But there were curiosities. He had contacts in nearly every Western embassy in every country he visited. His Barcelona lawyer had been connected to Franco's intelligence apparatus. Several people in his touring crew had backgrounds that raised questions. We never found proof, but we never found certainty of innocence either. 1. The theory that made sense to intelligence analysts. Julio wasn't a spy in the traditional sense. He wasn't stealing documents or recruiting assets or running operations. But he was likely an access agent, someone who could facilitate connections, pass messages, gather atmospheric intelligence, and provide cover for actual intelligence officers in his entourage. In espionage terms, a useful idiot who knew exactly how useful he was being. But there's another interpretation. Julio was just incredibly good at being Julio. Consider his background. Son of a prominent doctor, recovered from a devastating car accident through sheer willpower, built an international music career through charm, work ethic, and genuine talent, fluent in 6 languages because he loved connecting with audiences. Is it impossible that such a person could naturally build relationships with powerful people? That his charm wasn't a cover, but just charm? That his access to closed societies came from being famous, not from being a spy. The evidence for Julio as spy, circumstantial at best. Unusual access to closed societies, relationships with government officials, frequent international travel, multilingual capability, touring crew with unclear backgrounds, financial resources difficult to track. The evidence for Julio as just a famous singer, equally compelling. Commercial success explained his wealth. Fame explained his access. Personality explained his relationships. Professional touring explained his travel. Passion for languages explained communication. No credible witness or document confirming intelligence work. East Germany, 1983. Julio performed in East Berlin, less than 100 meters from the Berlin Wall. The Stasi, East Germany's notorious intelligence service, had their own thick file on him. A declassified Stasi report, 2008, translated from German, reads, "Subject displays no operational security awareness, speaks freely with civilians, shows genuine interest in German culture and history, does not avoid surveillance, either remarkably naive for a Western intelligence asset or more sophisticated than we can detect. Recommend continued observation." That's the mystery in a nutshell. Julio was either so clean he couldn't possibly be a spy, or so good at being a spy that he could operate in plain sight. Strong. The accusation became semi-public in 1985 when a French newspaper, Le Figaro, ran a story suggesting Julio might be working for Western intelligence. The article cited sources close to Eastern European security services and pointed to his improbable access and suspiciously friendly relationships with Western diplomats. Julio's response was characteristically cheerful. "I'm a lover, not a fighter, and I'm definitely not a spy. I just sing. If the KGB wants to listen to love songs, I'm honored." He didn't sue. He didn't demand retractions. He laughed it off publicly, while his lawyers sent private cease and desist letters. Strong. The question persisted through the 1980s. Strong. Every time Julio performed in a communist country, and he continued to do so regularly until the Berlin Wall fell, intelligence services on both sides monitored him. After the Cold War ended and archives began opening, journalists and researchers looked for proof. They found surveillance files. They found speculation. They found interesting coincidences. They never found a smoking gun. No classified document confirms Julio Iglesias worked for any intelligence service. No credible witness has come forward. No operation has been traced to him. No payment records show intelligence compensation. But they also found something else. Dozens of Western intelligence officers who, when asked off the record, smiled knowingly and said some version of, "I can neither confirm nor deny." But Julio Iglesias got around quite a bit, didn't he? The most revealing moment might have come in 1989, after the Berlin Wall fell. Julio was asked by a Spanish journalist whether he'd ever been approached by intelligence services about his Eastern European tours. His answer: "Everyone who travels to interesting places has interesting conversations. I've had conversations with many people about many things, but I've only ever had one job, singing." It's the kind of answer that's technically true while confirming nothing and denying nothing. Today, at 80 years old, Julio occasionally references the spy rumors with amusement. The KGB, the CIA, the CNI, Everyone thought I was working for someone else. The truth is simpler. I was working for the audience. I wanted to sing everywhere. If that made me suspicious, well, suspicion is the price of ambition. So was Julio Iglesias a Cold War spy? The honest answer, we don't know. We may never know. What we know for certain, he had access to places Western intelligence wanted to penetrate. He built relationships intelligence agencies would have valued. He was surveilled by multiple intelligence services. No definitive evidence of intelligence work has ever surfaced. His behavior could be explained either way. Perhaps the real story is simpler and stranger than either spy or innocent entertainer. Julio Iglesias was a man who understood that borders, politics, and suspicion were obstacles to his art. He was so committed to singing for every audience that he didn't care whether intelligence agencies thought he was working for them. He walked into every paranoid, surveilled, suspicious situation and acted exactly the same. Charming, open, friendly, relentlessly himself. If that was a cover, it was the best cover in espionage history. If it was just who he was, it was the most suspicious innocence imaginable. The KGB file on Julio Iglesias was 247 pages long. The CIA file, if it exists, remains classified. The CNI file is partially declassified, but heavily redacted. And Julio? He's still singing, still charming, still impossible to pin down. Which, if you think about it, is exactly what both a brilliant spy and a brilliant entertainer would do. The perfect ambiguity, the perfect mystery, the perfect song that never quite resolves. Was Julio Iglesias a Cold War spy? Ask the KGB. They watched him for a decade and still couldn't decide. Ask the CIA. They won't answer. Ask Julio. He'll smile and sing you a love song, and you still won't know.